Hey, welcome guys to my ban and restrictions announcement reaction. Um by the time of this recording, it's been like 12 hours. So I've gotten a little bit of more extra time to take it all in, digest the wording of the announcement, think about what it means, and I think that should be some pretty interesting content. So let's start off with Legacy. Grief getting banned is not a surprise to anyone, but there's a few things to unpack here. So they talk about, like, idealistically, Legacy, you can play a lot of different cards, but that doesn't matter if they get discarded, which is true. Um, then they talk about like how big the meta share of the deck was, and it kept getting better and better. The combination with Reanimate is just super strong. It gave like this combo deck, more protection, built-in anti-hate cards, etc., etc. Like, nobody can disagree about that. What I will say is they're kind of alluding to the fact that, getting your hand discarded is not enjoyable, which is a fair assessment. But I think this is basically the final proof that I needed that Legacy is slowly but surely approaching the commander state. So let me explain that a little bit. The commander state, I basically mean Wizards don't care in particular. It's something that it's like a dedicated, passionate community that kind of takes care of the format. They don't have to do much. They don't have to, review ban lists very often. They don't have to check up on like tournaments. They don't have to organize tournaments. They can even say, yeah, you guys go ahead and organize Eternal Weekend. We don't even have to put up the paintings anymore for it to be successful. That's kind of, and they can focus on the more competitive formats when it comes to, paths to the Pro Tour, etc. So when the corporate steps away from managing the format, who steps up, right? Pretty clear answer. That's going to be the community. That's going to be the individual player. And as a result, the ban list and the format as a whole is going to be curated more based on feelings than data. That's just a tendency where, let's say you have a commander group, 6 people, you meet up, I don't know, every Friday, every second Friday, and then you're like, oh, let's not play with infinite combos. Okay, sure. Let's not play with land destruction. Sure. Like, that's not fun, right? So that's when we move away from being competitive and we move to being, we're a game, we're supposed to have fun, stuff like that. So I'm not saying this is now a casual format. I'm saying it's moving away from being a competitive format, and it's slowly but surely moving towards being Commander-esque, which is fine. This is merely an observation. So with that logic, it makes a lot of sense that, you know how I feel about this. I'll play Legacy no matter what. I love old cards. I'll adapt. I'll do whatever. So I'm mainly just seeing this from a helicopter looking down and seeing how things transpire. So I'm totally fine with that. It's just the new world we live in, basically. So where does this leave the format? This leaves the format in a place where a lot of players are predicting that Psychic Frog is going to reign supreme. It's going to mainly make, whenever you play a fair blue deck, you're going to play that card, and then maybe you have a third color, maybe you prioritize having good mana and staying in blue-black, and that can be a problem down the line. If I were to make a prediction, I agree with that prediction. I think Psychic Frog is far and away the best thing to be doing if you're playing, let's say, Issa Delver or some Bant, whatever, mid-range deck. I don't think you're giving yourself the best chance to win, which is something I hope to be wrong about. Let me put it that way, because I do think it's more fun to play against different decks, but at the end of the day, I'm going to play what I think gives me the best chance of winning, and I'll definitely be exploring the Demir color combination. That's for sure. No need to go into like why Psychic Frog is a great card. Like, we all know that it's a 2-drop. It's such a low cost to play. It spirals away with the game if unanswered, and it even enables some brokenness. So that card is incredibly strong. It even dodges one of the most played removal spells of all time. So great card. Then they make some kind of like comparisons to Modern, which makes sense. Like, Reanimate is a way stronger card than the bad blink effects for Modern. So I guess we just move to Vintage. Let's do that instead, right? So Vintage is a different beast, and it has actually got me thinking, like the whole how they talk about legacy, vintage, and stuff like that. So I would say I have moderated my approach to these ban and restriction actions. So that's a cool one. So let's start with this one. Urza's Saga is restricted. So Urza's Saga, I remember when it came out, it took people a little while to realize like how small the opportunity cost is to put this into your deck. How just adding an extra layer of, if I have this, my opponent does not have a wasteland, I win the game. I play some workshop strategy, I get shut down by, what do I know, Null Rod or whatever, like the Jewel Shops deck. This is my plan B. It's kind of built in. It doesn't cost me a whole lot. And sometimes the opponent can force a will or whatever their way out of my plan A, but then they have to deal with these 6/6s. So as time went on, more and more decks adopted Urza Saga, and as a result, more and more decks adopted Wastelands, like decks that should not play Wasteland in the first place, like big blue decks or Oath decks. Generally decks that try and let their own plan, like, beat the opponent, but because of Urza Saga, that was simply not feasible. So all of a sudden, we have a format where everybody's playing either Saga or Wasteland, or I think the one outlier is Doomsday that's simply trying to win before the tokens become a big factor, right? So Urza Saga was not only a powerful proactive tool, it was also a good card because it could tutor up these, let's say you tutor up Grafdigger's Cage against Oath. That's an incredibly potent tool to have in the mid-game, let's call it that for the sake of argument. It could be turn 3, right? You could find Graveyard Hate or, the aforementioned Cage against Dredge and kind of shut them down. So it also gave you more mileage out of your, like, one Needle, one Soul Guide Lantern, one Grafdigger's Cage, whatever the case may be. Even a card like Haywire might, but I'll get into that in a bit, because what was really the thing that hit home was that people started playing, quote-unquote bad cards like Spreading Seas. I remember putting that on the map. Yeah, I'm looking at the date here. That's like 1.5 years ago. I started playing Spreading Seas, and it was like such a bad card. But if every deck is either a Saga deck or a Bazaar deck, then it was worth it, right? And people still played it in the flex slots all the way up to the restriction of this card. People played bad cards in mono white like March of Otherworldly Light. That's only a playable card because you can go 1 mana kill a Saga as, at the default against the format, right? People played for like Haywire Might as a pseudo mirror trump card. Like, I've even registered that card. It's kind of embarrassing to think about that. The Urza Saga kind of warped the format so much that we played bad cards. So in general, I'll say that is kind of what hit the nail in the coffin for me, that we started not only just playing, Wastelands in decks, that's fine, but we started playing quote-unquote bad cards because of Urza Saga. It meant a lot for deck building. People could play more Force of Vigors than usual. People could play more Dress Down than usual. All of that stuff, which is just healthy, metagame tweaks. But I think it's going to be a cool breath of fresh air. I will say, one thing that I thought about was that Vintage has been incredibly balanced for a long time, and this is potentially tampering with that. So I'm saying there's a risk to change a winning team, so to speak. So maybe we're going to see like an improvement, maybe we're not. But the point is, it's kind of a gamble. So that's like the only bad thing about it for me. But I think it's going to be cool that games don't revolve around Saga so much anymore. When you evaluate your opener, it's like, oh, I hope my opponent doesn't have an Urza Saga. That's going to be a cool, fresh breath of air. So with that said, let's move on to the Vexing Bauble restriction, which is the most controversial one, I will say. So when this card got printed, I only talked to Vintage to one of my friends, and I told him, this is going to make the average game quality worse. And what I mean with that is, it's a card that makes the die roll more important. It's a card that makes your hands more polarized. Like, your great hands can turn into your worst hands. Let's say you have, I don't know, double mocks, something, whatever. You all know Vintage, right? So basically, either this is a terrible card, 2-mana draw card, on the draw a lot, or this is a haymaker, really, really strong 1 mana on the play that sometimes has to get forced, sometimes strands cards in the opponent's hand, sometimes strands cards from like the opponent's draws. And this is where their point of restricting chows back in the day, I got to think about that, where it was like, we don't restrict this basically because of power level. We restrict this because people, when they think about vintage, they think about, casting their Moxen and doing stuff. So with that logic, it kind of makes sense that Vexing Bauble had to go. I will say that restricting Vexing Bauble, nobody's going to be sad about that, right? So that's just, nobody's like, oh, I just had this deck built around 4 Vexing Baubles, now I don't know where to go. Like, this was a role player all along. So that is exactly why the cost of restricting this card is so small. And I think that's important to notice. And I also will say that Vintage is sometimes struggling with the, like, there's this fabled story about Vintage being a turn 1 format. Oh yeah, people die at turn 1, you can't do anything. And Vexing Bauble is a card that does not help that narrative. So if the objective is to get new players in, we don't want cards that swing the game turn. We don't want more cards that swing the game turn 1 potentially. We want fewer cards that do that, right? So that's why Chalice of the Void's restricted. That's why Vexing Bauble is restricted. That's why they restricted Thorn of Amethyst. That's why Lodestone Golem is restricted. That's why Trinisphere is restricted, right? Those cards are very strong if they're like reliably cast on turn 1, and they're also annoying. So this is where my view on things basically has shifted a bit. It's where, okay, if we say that Legacy and Vintage are largely community driven, then what is the best player experience is actually important. Where if, this was a Pro Tour format or whatever, higher stakes, then that is less relevant, right? Then we play to win, basically. But now we also play to grow the player base. We grow to keep people engaged through their 30s and 40s, and we want to keep, because it's hard to get new players for Legacy and Vintage, and if we start losing players, then it's only going one way, right? So now I kind of understand that, and I think that came with the realization that these formats are kind of quote unquote on our own, right? So I'm pretty excited to have realized that angle. With that being said, I'm still going to approach it from a very competitive standpoint. Every tournament I sign up to win. I have fun when I win. I have fun when I try and win, right? So I lose a lot, but I also have fun doing that. So it's not really a problem for me whether I get, Griefed in Legacy, Blood Moon in Legacy, Chalice in Legacy, Turn 1 Gristlebrand in Legacy. That's not really relevant for my enjoyment, but now I kind of understand why it is for others, right? So basically, I'm excited for changes. It's good for me because I can make, videos with new decks, and people are gonna, want to watch those and get inspired. And that's basically my favorite word. It's inspiration, right? That's what Magic is about. It's about, oh, what's this guy doing? It's not about copying anybody's homework. It's about, oh, what's this guy doing? What's this girl doing? And you just, pick up small bits and pieces here and there to form your own opinion, form your own identity. We're basically mirroring other humans. Pretty basic behavior. And as a result, we hopefully leave the format better than we found it. And that's what I'm hopeful for with these bans and restrictions. And yeah, with that being said, I'm not going to take any much more of your time. I'm just going to say thanks so much for following my journey. It means a lot to me. I spent some time like collecting my thoughts about this topic. It's a one take, no notes. That's what I like to do. So sometimes I say some bullshit that I regret or didn't come out the right way. But then we have a conversation about that in the comments, and everything is going to be fine. Yeah, I'm excited to play Vintage and Legacy, and hopefully I will see you at the tables. Thanks for watching.